Hello there, lovely ladies, lovely gentlemen who follow the channel. We're going to get started on one more live. And in today's live, we're going to take on the question, is it ethical, is it correct to use the word narcissist if you are not a psychologist who is officially diagnosing somebody? Hello there, people who are connecting, what's up? So before we get started with that question, and that's a good question, a very relevant one, I just want to let everybody know that if you identify with this approach that I have for healing from childhood narcissistic abuse, then heads up, because on July 3rd, we're launching the Inner Mastery Lab. It's a 10-week online program aimed specifically at helping you learn how to navigate and heal from childhood narcissistic abuse. Excellent. So let's get started on today's live topic. Well, really the first thing that I want to say is I want to let you know why I started this channel, and then I'm going to cover some other topics about the word narcissist. When I started the channel, I obviously was very scared about possible consequences. And I remember the very first time that I posted my first video on narcissistic mothers, I was terrified because I thought, are you really going to do this? Are you going to expose yourself? You know, you could just write texts or record audios. Are you going to put your face out there? What if your mom finds out? What if your mom sues you? What if you can't take the backlash? And, you know, I started in Brazil. So what if Brazilian society is not ready for this? So I was really, really scared. And really the only way that I found the courage to start talking about this subject, it was really using the exact same method that I used way back in the day when I found the courage to go no contact with my mom. And what that entails is a very simple process of calming myself down, becoming perfectly still and quiet, and then asking my internal voice whether something makes sense to me or not. So I was very terrified, and I asked my heart, should I go through with this? Should I post this? Because I'm scared and there's all these issues. And the answer I got back was a very calm, wise, rock solid, go for it. And the reason that I decided to go for it is because I considered that the only reason I was able to break free, particularly because I was the golden child. So statistically, that's the person who's least likely to break free. I found that I could only break free because other women and other men were courageous enough to talk about this subject. And they were courageous enough to validate my story and tell me that I wasn't crazy. And this is what I want to do. So the purpose of all of these videos is for me to do onto you what was done onto me. Honestly, when I was down and out and I thought there was no solution, random people on the internet came and saved me. They saved me with information, with validation. And that was really important because I thought I was crazy and I thought I was an ungrateful child and all of that stuff. So having said that, this is the reason why I talk about pathological narcissism, because I believe that if you grew up in such a family environment, that's really the same thing as growing up in a cult. And what this means is that you do not have agency over your own mind. You do not think for yourself. You cannot see reality clearly. You are within the narcissist's sphere of influence, and you don't know how to break free. And we do need some validation from somewhere so we understand that we're not crazy and we have the right to break free. All right. So having said that, since I started the channel, obviously it's grown, and you know, I have videos with lots of views now, hundreds of thousands of views, and people are talking about the subject. But the word narcissist actually became such like a garden variety sort of word that people throw it around, and I don't really know that people know what it means. The first thing I want to say about that is that even though it seems very dangerous, because you might think, wait a second, you can't just go around diagnosing people. That's not ethical, fair, and that could bring about some pretty crappy consequences. But the truth of the matter is, one aspect that I'd like to bring up, and then I'll talk about the other ones, is that it's the people who create the language. There's no way that you can prevent the people and live culture from incorporating a language into its daily speech and transforming it, because that's how language is formed. So it's impossible for us to prevent people from using the word narcissist, particularly because it's such an important topic nowadays, okay? Other than that, I've also noticed that my channel, it actually attracts a number of different people who came from toxic family environments and are trying to make sense of what they went through. Many of these people might not have parents who have narcissistic personality disorder. And, you know, they might have parents who have narcissistic personality disorder. In the case that they don't have these parents, I find that the sort of tools that I provide are useful regardless of what sort of toxic relationship with your parents you're dealing with. Because essentially what I do is I help people find their own inner courage, wisdom, and take care of themselves. So if that's the sort of healing that you need, I can help you with that, regardless of specifically what your mom or dad's diagnosis would be. The other thing that I've also noticed is that narcissism, even when it would be like, you know, specifically diagnosed as a personality disorder and everything, it generally occurs in a way that is comorbid with other conditions. So for you guys who study this stuff, you know that narcissism frequently occurs with histrionic, antisocial, and borderline traits. We also know that, for example, covert narcissists are quite neurotic. What this means is that they have a heavy experience of life, whereas the grandiose narcissist actually thinks he's the real deal, you know, he's the best one out there. And his emotional experience of himself is actually pretty elevated, and, you know, people outside him probably applaud him. When you're dealing with a covert narcissist, you're actually dealing with someone who quite possibly suffers from depression. Regardless of what you're dealing with, it's very common for narcissists to have other coexisting personality disorders or traits of them, or also other mood disorders. So, you know, there could be depression involved. I've seen cases where there's schizophrenia involved along with the narcissism. Imagine that. Dementia, particularly when we're dealing with older narcissists, dementia might set on. Bipolar disorder is something that could co-occur with narcissism. And it could also be wrongly diagnosed because of the hypomania and the mania phase that are very similar to narcissistic grandiosity. But the point of saying all of these things is that, yeah, it's true. When we're talking about narcissists, we're probably not talking about someone who just has the characteristics of a pathological narcissist. We know that they probably have other mood disorders, other personality disorders, and we know also that narcissism, along with other disorders, it occurs on a spectrum. So when you say narcissist, you're really dealing with a whole lot of different things. You might be dealing with someone who has narcissistic traits, right? And then this is someone who actually has a chance of healing if they want to put in the work, because they have traits. They do not have a fixed personality structure. And then when you move up the spectrum, you have people who have narcissistic personality disorder. And then you're talking about those people who literally can never admit when they're wrong. And if you move further on up the spectrum, then you're talking about what was known as the malignant narcissist or the psychopathic narcissist, right? So all of these different things, the spectrum, other mood disorders, other personality disorders, kind of validate this idea that maybe it doesn't make sense to just call a person narcissist, because really there's a lot of complex things going on at the same time there. But the thing is, the point of at least the channels that I follow and the professionals that I follow, the point of using the word narcissist, it's never about diagnosing anyone, because really what are you going to do with that? Diagnosis is used for treatment. And is the mother that you're dealing with or the father that you're dealing with that has those narcissistic traits, are they up for treatment? They're probably not up for treatment. And if they are getting treatment, it's probably for depression or for something else. So I really don't think that we have to worry about this aspect of diagnosing people, because that's not the reason the word narcissist is being used here. The reason it's being used here in my channel and in many other channels on the internet and, in blogs and in articles, the reason it's being used is so that we have a word to draw attention to a series of behavior that occur in a pattern. So we're talking about the grandiosity, the need to feel special, the sense of entitlement, the exploitation of others, the jealousy, right? We're talking about lack of empathy. We're talking about needing excessive admiration and attention. We are talking about the traits that are listed in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders. But we don't have to like specifically wait for a diagnosis in order to discuss these traits, because the discussion of these traits is very valid for other reasons. If you're in a relationship with a narcissist and you need to understand what's up, right? If you have a mom who's a narcissist, a dad who's a narcissist, a friend who's a narcissist, a boss who's a narcissist, if you are deprived of the opportunity of using the word narcissist in order to educate yourself, in order to find information on the subject, in order to learn about and identify personality patterns, then how on earth are you going to protect yourself? I completely agree that we cannot use narcissist as some sort of diagnosis. Like even when I talk about my mom, oh, my mom is a pathological narcissist. What I'm saying is she has pathological narcissistic traits. And whether or not she would get an official diagnosis is another issue altogether, because you can't diagnose someone just for the fact that you think they're an asshole, right? So diagnosis involves, particularly a personality disorder diagnosis, involves you actually suffering from your condition. And many narcissists don't feel that they suffer or won't admit to it. So you see how this whole diagnosis thing isn't really black and white. Diagnoses are useful for treatment, right? But the word narcissism, the word narcissist, this is useful for education. Do you understand? Another reason why I think it's perfectly relevant to use the word is because when you study authors such as, for example, Craig Malkin, he talks about something called positive narcissism, healthy narcissism. So narcissism isn't in and of itself something pathological. It might be being used in that sense by some people, but narcissism is also an area of study, right? You can study narcissism. Narcissism is something that babies are, children are narcissistic, teenagers are narcissistic. So it's a pattern of behavior that deserves study, deserves being researched, it deserves being observed, right? Because it's part of how human personality is formed. We all start out narcissistic, right? So that's another reason why I think it's not unethical at all for you to use the word narcissism or narcissist when you're talking about something that happens on a spectrum, is actually a complete area of study, and actually has like a positive version to it according to some authors. So what I want to make perfectly clear here is that the way that the word is being used and the purpose for which it's being used, at least in the communities that I frequent, is a healthy way. If you take into consideration the fact that the internet is always going to attract a whole bunch of people who are trolls and who don't really want to do inner work, and so they're just like, basically vomiting out their pain all over the internet, and lots of people who won't even watch the videos and pay attention to the information that's being transmitted, and then they'll come up with their opinions about things. And we have a cat over here. Y'all see this little kitty cat? It's kind of cold in Brazil, so she wants to be close to me all the time. And I don't think that we should pay attention to people who aren't on a healing path, who aren't looking to educate themselves, and who aren't specifically looking to transcend wounds and transcend limiting life situations as they use the word narcissist. It might even be just to blame someone else, or because they don't understand the word. That's fine. All of those confusions, all of those things happen, but it does not detract from our purpose here, which is healing. And in order to protect yourself, in order to heal, you have to be able to identify those patterns. And if you grew up with those patterns and that's all that's normal for you, you don't have a word for it. It's normal for you. I remember when I found the word narcissist and I started reading and I started educating myself, everything started making sense. I think it's really unfair to deprive people of this word and all of the sense and meaning and the answers that it brings to people's lives. Also, I suspect, hey Manu, hey Ricardo, I suspect that when people get really worried about the way that narcissist is being used, I imagine, at least here in Brazil, where people are very family oriented, it's a Latin culture, so mothers are sacred, you can never question them. I imagine that what goes through people's minds is something along the lines of, oh, you can't call your mom a narcissist or your dad a narcissist because this will make you want to distance yourself from them, and this is going to destroy the Brazilian families. And this is a really, really, really unrealistic fear to have. It's completely unrealistic. And the reason it's completely unrealistic is because the actuality, the truth of it, and I know because I work with this and I've done this for years, is that even if you do finally recognize that your parents were super abusive, regardless of whether you have a word or not, it's really hard for people to go no contact or for them to distance themselves. As a matter of fact, a great deal of the inner work that I help people do, that I facilitate for other people, has got to do with them understanding that love and acceptance and connection is still available to them if they're courageous enough to go low or no contact with the toxic people in their lives, oftentimes toxic family members. And they don't want to do this because it's painful as heck. It's painful as heck. Hey, Patricia. So it's not realistic at all for you to think that, if a mother and a daughter, for example, have a perfectly healthy relationship and this daughter goes on the internet and then she watches this random YouTuber being like, oh, there are these things called narcissistic mothers out there. It's not realistic for you to think that she's going to be like, oh, well, I guess I was confused about my loving relationship with my mom and I guess she's an abuser and I guess I have to go no contact. This is not realistic. The opposite is realistic. Even when people have proof that their family members are toxic as heck, they don't want to go no contact. So I think that if this is your argument, if you're scared that you're going to, divide healthy families because you're going to put this seed into people's minds that, no, some parents can be narcissistic. I think that you can relax about that because that's not realistic. That's not what happens. And you might think that you're actually defending families and you're defending family union and healthy family structures when you try to avoid talking about unhealthy traits that our parents might have. But what you're actually doing is you're exposing people to abuse generation after generation after generation. Because think about it. If somebody misdiagnoses someone, which is people's fear, right? Oh, you can't use that word for all sorts of things. You'll misdiagnose people. What's going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. If that person's in treatment, there is no treatment for narcissistic personality disorder that has scientific research. There's Sam Vaknin's cold therapy. He says he's getting some great results, but we don't have any scientific research yet. So it's not like you're depriving this person of an opportunity of being treated for narcissistic personality disorder because we don't have that treatment really. We can minimize some behaviors if the narcissist wants to work on them, but there's no treatment for getting rid of them. And if you're a daughter or a son of a narcissist, how is it going to help you? This diagnosis? Is your mom going to go to therapy? So essentially, when you're scared of misdiagnosing because you think it's going to deprive people of correct treatment or you're going to tear families apart, this doesn't make sense. The actual consequences of not having a safe space for people to talk about the word narcissist, right? Yeah, and I feel that in Brazil, that word is almost like saying, what's that dude from Harry Potter? Was it Voldemort? I don't remember his name, okay? But the guy whose name you can't say. I kind of feel it's treated like that. And then what happens in practice is that you have these generations and generations and generations of people who want to place a word for what they've been through that is so confusing, that is so absolutely different from what society keeps telling them that they're supposed to experience as a family. That doesn't seem to make any sense because no matter how hard they try, no matter what they do, hey Tammy, hey Jenny, No matter what they do, they can never make their mom or their dad happy. They just want a word to understand what's up. And then what do we do to these people? We're like, oh, no, 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 no. Don't say the word. Oh, horrible things, what might happen? What horrible things are going to happen from saying the word? When you don't say the word, hey, Deborah. When you don't say the word, people are lonely. They think they're guilty. They think it's their fault. They think they don't have the right to distance themselves because they're just ungrateful children. They think that, they're misreading the situation and all of that horrible crap that happened to them wasn't really abuse. So it's not safe for us to deprive people from this opportunity to finally talk about this, because the consequences of using the word incorrectly, unless I misunderstood what other people's worries are. If you're watching this video and you're like, Tari, that's not why people are worried about using that word incorrectly, then let me know in the comments, like, why are people so worried about this when the consequences of not using it are so horrible for people? Remember, when you don't heal, you do the same stuff. You do the same stuff to your children. You do the same stuff to your children, and they do the same stuff to their children, and so on and so forth. So we have to heal. We have to be mature, and we have to talk about it. All right? What else did I want to tell you guys about this? And I guess the last thing that I want to say here is that I understand that if you're watching this video in English, then the thing you have lots of access to is information on narcissism. This is not so in Portuguese, okay? I and a few others am one of the few people online who are talking about this when it comes to parents. It's just for you to get an idea of how taboo this subject is. And so oftentimes people, because it's such a taboo subject and they don't want to talk about it because, it's unpleasant, they'll use an argument like, Tari, you can't talk about this. You are not a licensed psychologist. I'm not a licensed psychologist. I am a licensed psychoanalyst and a coach. And what that kind of makes you think, right? Tari, you can't talk about this subject because you're not a licensed psychologist. What it makes you think is that, hey, Fernanda, is that a licensed psychologist would know how to give all of this information that I and some other people online specifically give on narcissism. And this is not true. I don't know what it's like abroad, but in Brazil, it is not true that with people who go study psychology actually do any in-depth study on this at all. They don't. How do I know this? Because when I started working with this, I looked for university courses, psychology university courses, because I want to be a good professional. I love working. I'm a Capricorn. I was made to work. I love it. And I was trying to find myself, some great education. And I couldn't find any college that actually covered this, any university that actually covered this. And I have a bunch of friends who are psychologists, and I have a bunch of clients who are psychologists. And I asked them, did you study this? Because you're a psychologist. You have a PhD in God knows what. You are the daughter of a narcissist, and yet you are doing the Inner Mastery Lab with me. You're doing the workshop Entra no Seu Poder with me, because they don't have information. When in Brazil, in a traditional psychology school, you do not learn about this. So it is not fair, coherent, or reasonable, particularly in cultures like this, okay, for you to demand that people not talk about something so serious using an argument that makes no sense. Makes no sense, right? And the two arguments that make no sense is, oh, you're going to tear families apart. Not true. And, oh, psychologists are the best people to talk about this. The best people to talk about any subject, it's the person who studies the most. It's the person who gives a damn and pays attention to his or her clients and learns from them. It's the person who's always working on herself or himself, right? And if you've been through this, that helps as well. If you've been through the experience, it helps as well. But when all is said and done, the true purpose of everything is helping people guide themselves. Help people guide themselves by giving people information, all right? I think that when you tell people, don't use that word, you're not a professional. It's kind of like a pastor saying to someone, wait a second, you want to find God? You want to find God inside of you? No, 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 no. You need to come to church. You need to pay, what is it? Dízimo, how do they say it in English? 10% of what you make. You need to do all these things and you need to talk to me. I am the link to God. And then this person is left thinking that God is not inside of her and she doesn't have the tools for transcendence. I think when you tell people who are in pain and who need information, you cannot use that word. It's like you're telling them that they cannot take the tools that are available to them and break free with no serious argument. I think people need to break free. And so long as we're ethical about it, so long as we're perfectly transparent, so long as if you're a professional like me, tell people, hey, I'm not a licensed psychologist. I am a licensed psychoanalyst, a coach. I've been through this and I train psychologists on this. So long as you're transparent about what you do and what you don't do, use the word because the word is powerful and it sets people free. All right, guys, that is all I wanted to let you guys know. Just again, heads up, if you identify with my approach to healing from childhood narcissistic abuse, we are launching the Inner Mastery Lab again on July 3rd. So watch out. Sometimes we have an early bird special. We have certain offers and bonuses that you can get if you are the first few to purchase the program. And if you have any questions that you would want me to make a live about, please let me know in the comments. Send them to AskTary, tarianarocha.com.br/AskTary. And I would love to make a live video answer for you. Because I consider you my university. So when you tell me that you need information, I go and I study it so that I can better serve you. For me, that's pleasurable, and I derive great pleasure from working this way. Thank you so much for your time. If you're following the channel, if you're not following the channel, subscribe. Make sure to hit that bell so you get notified when I launch Portuguese or English videos. Heads up, keep an eye out for the Inner Mastery Lab. And that's it, guys. See you next time. Let's take a look over here.